Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar for the announcement of the Vahakn and Dadrian Archive Project. My name is Nanor Hartunyan, and it is my privilege as Program Coordinator of the Armenian Genocide Research Program within the Promise Armenian Institute to welcome you to this event, which focuses on the powerful legacy of Professor Vahakn Dadrian, a preeminent scholar of Armenian genocide studies. Today, we will hear from various individuals associated with the development and success of the project, beginning with Dr. Taner Akçam, who is the inaugural director of the Armenian Genocide Research Program. Prior to coming to UCLA, Dr. Akçam was a professor at Clark University in Massachusetts, where for many years, he was the Kalustyan and Mugar Chair in Modern Armenian History and Genocide in the Strassler Center for Holocaust and Genocide Studies. We are also delighted to hear from Maggie Mangassarian Goschin, who has served as the museum director of the Adobe-certified Museum for the past 29 years. Maggie not only manages and preserves the museum's artifacts, she also hosts various programs, including interpretive exhibitions, literary events, and public lectures. And thank you to the Adobe-certified Museum for co-sponsoring this event, as well as collaborating on this project with UCLA. Following Maggie, we will hear from Dr. Anna Aleksanyan, who is a postdoctoral fellow at the Armenian Genocide Research Program here at UCLA, as well as the award-winning photographer, independent researcher, and artist, Bardig Kouyoumjian, who has been photographing the Armenian diaspora for over 40 years from the perspective of the struggle for recognition and preservation of the memory of the Armenian genocide. Also, on behalf of UCLA, I would like to acknowledge our presence on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the indigenous Gabrielino Tongva peoples. Lastly, I wanted to mention that for those joining us on Zoom, you have the opportunity to send questions to us by clicking on the Q&A button on the bottom portion of your screen and typing in your question. Please be sure to be as specific and succinct as possible. We anticipate that the webinar itself will take around 45 minutes, after which we will begin the Q&A portion of the event. Also, please note that this event is being recorded for future viewing on our Promise Armenian Institute website and YouTube channel. And in the unlikely event that this webinar drops for any reason, please rejoin using the same link as before. Thank you all, and I will now turn the event over to Dr. Akçam to provide us with a more in-depth overview of what to expect today.
Good morning or good evening, wherever you are in the world, and thank you for joining to our webinar today. Today, we are really excited to share insight into the Vahakn Dadrian online archive project. Vahakn Dadrian, as you all know, is renowned as a pioneering figure in the study of the Armenian genocide. He, along with Richard Hovhannisyan, was the founder and trailblazer of the Armenian genocide research. And it is a typical pattern that survivors initiate research into genocide, and this holds true for Armenian genocide studies as well. And among the notable individuals who spearheaded these efforts are Aram Andonian and Father Grigor Gergerian, who left substantial archives behind. And Vahakn Dadrian and Richard Hovhannisyan serve as vital links connecting us to the foundational work of these early researchers. Their extensive archives are a testament to their dedication. In today's session, we will delve deeply into Vahakn Dadrian's archive. You will gain an appreciation for the vast amount of resources an academic must compile to produce scholarly work. When you eventually have the opportunity to explore these materials yourself, you will be able to appreciate the sheer scope of Dadrian's collections, even it's just a fraction of it. As many of you are aware, Dadrian holds an invaluable place in my life. His unwavering support and significant contribution have been the cornerstone of my academic journey. Without his guidance, the body of work that I produce would not have been possible. My gratitude towards him is immeasurable, and I'm deeply indebted to him for his mentorship. Before we dive into the scope and content of his archives and how this project came about, let's first acquaint ourselves with Dadrian, the man. We will watch a short video about his life story and uncover the motivation behind his engagement with the Armenian genocide narrative. Following that, we will have the pleasure of hearing from other participants and discuss the respective subjects related to this field and Armenian genocide in general. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Akçam. Now we will be playing a clip from the 1997 documentary, A Wall of Silence, The Unspoken Fate of the Armenians.
I apologize. I will play the correct clip shortly.
I don't want to be in the picture.
My brother is here. My younger brother died 3 years ago in Istanbul. I have left two sisters. One is in St. Petersburg, Florida, and my other older sister lives in Nice, France.
Professor Dadrian, where were you born?
I was born in Istanbul, Turkey.
And your family?
My family is from Çorum, a town in the province of Ankara, central Anatolia.
And what language did you speak at home?
Armenian.
Çorum.
Yeah.
In Çorum we speak Turkish. In Istanbul, Armenian.
Yeah, in the old country when I wasn't born, when they were living there, it was Turkish, the language. Armenians spoke Turkish. But in Istanbul, when I was born, this language spoken was Armenian.
Were the events during World War I a topic, an issue in your family?
World War I?
Yeah,
Well, I was too little to understand, but I remember that my relatives, women particularly, would once in a while get together and they would sob and weep and cry, remembering their experiences in deportation and massacres. I remember, they remembering their lost members of family, and all of a sudden all of them begin to cry out loud. This is the only thing I remember. Otherwise, there was no discussion. I was too little to understand.
What is the story of your relatives? Do you know?
Yeah, well, my family has a split story. Most of the members of my family survived the deportations because of the position of my father. He was an American-educated lawyer. He went to Merzifon College, and then he became a judge in Çorum, and was very respected by Turks as a very just man. And being an aristocrat, he was born into wealth. My grandfather was in manufacturing business, and they had lots of properties. Half of the town of Çorum belonged to our family, and my grandfather built the church in Çorum, the Armenian church, and my father assisted in the erection of the school in Çorum, Armenian school, and the Armenian Patriarchate of Istanbul declared Dadrian family as national benefactors.
There will be a second part of the video about his involvement with Armenian genocide. Yeah.
When I was a student at the University of Vienna in Austria, one of my professors, upon recognizing that I am an Armenian, asked me if I had ever heard of Franz Werfel and whether I was familiar with his novel 40 Days of Musadag. Having just come from Istanbul, Turkey, where there was no such access to Franz Werfel or his literature, I said, no, I don't know. He urged me to read the book. I read the 2 volumes twice, and I think that was a turning point. For the first time, I realized that I am a member of a terribly persecuted race who has been subjected to mass murder without any legal consequences for the perpetrator. This aroused in me a great sense of rebellion against injustice, and I began to feel even more identified with my nation, the Armenian people, as an underdog, and I decided to relinquish my interest in science, mathematics, and begin to explore history of the Armenian people, particularly the World War I episode of genocide. I was still not finally committed to this field until I read a second book by an Armenian priest who was educated in Germany, and then he survived the genocide through the help of German officers. So he wrote his experiences of genocide in a book called Hai Kochgota, Armenian Golgotha. The horrendous details of this book almost drove me crazy. There are graphic descriptions of atrocities against the Armenians, and that was to me the turning point. I said, I'm committed now to pursue study of genocide and particularly expose the crime as a crime against humanity. Several years ago, the Turkish Historical Society organized a symposium in Ankara, and
Thank you, Dr. Akçam, for sharing those clips, which gave us a deeper look into the motivation and mindset of Professor Dadrian throughout his career. I will now turn the event over to Maggie Goschin, who will speak about the birth, development, and current stage of the project.
Maggie, we are waiting.
I think you're muted, Maggie.
Thank you. Thank you, Nanor. Thank you, Professor Akçam, for your leadership. Thank you for your continuous encouragement. And thank you, the Armenian Research Program, Promise Armenian Institute, for organizing this webinar and giving us a platform to share our odyssey on this monumental work that we embarked in 2009. It was January 2009 when our chairman, Martin Eskidjian, the founder's son, initiated that we should embark on this monumental project. He believed in Professor Dadrian's archival work. He believed in his presentation. He was fascinated. Professor was giving lectures since 2003 at the museum and elsewhere in the Southern California. And we proposed to Professor Dadrian after a few months. It took me that much strength to get my strength together to ask him if he would be interested. And to my amazement, he said yes. We had digitized a couple of his journals. Professor doesn't use modern technology. We had to show him what we could do with the modern technology electronically. His vast work of 50 years, his archives that could be available to professors or scholars in the future. And he was on board, and his next response was, when can we begin the project? The only condition was that we couldn't go to his house to pick up his archives. He was still very guarded. He said, I will mail a couple of files at a time. You begin the scanning, and then we go on from there. We did this for a year and a half with a lot of struggles, a lot of challenges. The professor was traveling. The boxes were not coming on time. They weren't picking up from the post office. It got to the point a year and a half later, we had to strategize ourselves to see what's the next option was, because it wasn't working properly and we were not progressing. And the gentleman who was doing the scanning was getting frustrated because we were not continuous. So I approached the professor, what was the next step we could do? Otherwise, we can't continue. And this is vitally important. And he realized it, and he allowed us to go and pick up his archives and bring to Los Angeles. And me and Edward, the gentleman who did the digitization at the time, the first individual, we flew in to Rochester, which is an hour and a half drive to his house. And we spent a year of 5 days there, arranging all the archives and putting into special envelopes, tying it. We ended up with about 7 luggages, 2 large ones, 5 medium size. I had been in his house a year before with my friend Don McKean, as she needed to talk to him. So I was familiar with his surrounding, and I realized the second time I came in, the library has grown, that it needed more attention. I realized the professor was also needed help as he was getting older. So I proposed to him if in the future he would consider to come to Los Angeles. He's done all he could do for Armenians, and it was time for us to pay him back for what he's done for us. And he was very, he considered it and he agreed. Unfortunately, it didn't pan out. There were some challenges and interferences. Nevertheless, we came back, we continued with the digitization. However, the professor has his own classification, his indexing, his methods of classifying his personal archives. And in order for us to digitize, we had to spend many hours preparing it before we could digitize it. And I will refer that to Bardig to share it, because he was the second individual who worked on the archives. After 2.5 years, the gentleman, Edward, said he couldn't continue anymore. He was getting a little bit, becoming mundane for him, and he had other projects to work on. So we stopped the project for a few months. I always scouted for companies that would take over. However, most of them, they didn't have the attention that we needed for them to put for the archive, because some of the documents are so fragile and so important. You can't put it in a machine and push it out on the other side. It needed a lot of attention. So we test them first before we consider. And then my next option was to consider to get in touch with my friend Bardig in Paris, who's I'm known his background would be perfect fit for this project. And he said he would be honored to come and help us. He came for 3 years, 3 months each time, 5, 6 hours, 7 hours a day, daily, 6 days, sometimes 5 to 6 days, depending. And he really created the core of the project and put us in the right direction and created the index. After 3 years, I knew that Bardik wouldn't be able to continue because that was the limit he said he could. So I turned around to Showa Foundation, because I always think about what's the next plan, so that we can have progress going. Meantime, I'm always in touch with the professor. I was flying every year, going to see him, how he's doing, because I was kind of worried about him too. And each time I went, he added to me more files were coming out from different parts of the house that I didn't know existed, because my focus was only in his library. And every time I was bringing more archives with me. So when I went to Showa, I have to thank Jerry Papazian and Dr. Carla Garabedian for facilitating me this meeting. And Dr. Gruner, right away, I had taken a file with me, turned out to be a German archives. And right away, he said that he would be more interested in securing the library because they have the Michael Hagopian movies, films, and Professor Richard Hovannessian's testimonies. And they do need a library to coincide with that collection. So my direction changed. So I knew right away that their interest wasn't in the archives. So I had to fly in to see the professor again and see if by any chance his books were available for library or he would consider. To my amazement, he told me that he had created a trust. He had a new trustee, and the books had not been assigned to anyone, and he was on board to donate to USC, but no books will leave the property until after his demise. And he will remain in his house and the trustee would take care of him until the end. And the only solution was he said that he would allow us to keep the archives to continue the project and for us to become the custodians. So we made us an agreement so that in case the inevitable happened, that everything was arranged, and then we would turn around and then donate the library to USC, and that's what happened. After I came back, I realized now I was free to do what I can do with the files. The files were sitting in the boxes. We had made a list of what was in the box, but because the files were not ours, we couldn't make anything. The files needed attention. A lot of staples, a lot of erosion got in because of humidity. The professor house was an older home. They didn't have proper temperature. It needed a lot of attention. So we were able, me and my daughter, on weekends to put in proper archival folders, archival boxes. Bardig had created an index for us, so we added the box number for each of the file that coincided. The professor has his own methods of putting in the name, the tag on each of the folder about the perpetrator, whoever the file is about. What he writes with ink pen, it started already smearing or erased because of the ink faded away. And for scanning, you need to have a proper documentation. We kept the original folder the way it was, but then we added a new folder with the new tag so it would be easier for scanning. We created 2 rooms, archival rooms, and we did temperature control. So archival boxes. That took about between 2017 to 2023. By the time we completed, we ended up with 585 folders. It's about 60 archival boxes. Another problem was the boxes because they don't carry the size as his documents are. Some of his documents are European documents. They're 22 inches long. Archival boxes don't come this size. So we were able to come up with a method to create our own boxes that are acid-free but can accommodate those archives. I have to thank many people that have helped me along the way. Dr. Mehmet Polatel happened to be in 2020 at USC. He helped us with the Turkish and Ottoman so that some of the files didn't have tags. We needed help. Anita Topakjian with the German archives and Austrian. My 2 volunteers, one especially more specialized only on, focused mainly on the newspapers. And then Nora was focused with me with the folders, because if you take it to scanning those folders, there should not be any staples. Some companies remove, some they don't. They don't want to be bothered tearing the page or damaging. They don't want the responsibility. I have to thank all the donors that helped me financially with all my trips and all the expenses that was involved. And ultimately, meantime, all along, I was looking for companies. Finally, we were able to locate it. UCLA, I find out that they do outside companies as well. So I approached them and they told me there was a year wait because they had other projects ahead of time. Meantime, we were very fortunate to have Professor Akçam at UCLA inaugural genocide program. So he got involved in the project. I asked for his leadership because I've already done what I can from our end, but now we need a scholarly approach. We are going on the next phase. And Anna was introduced to us to do the spreadsheet for the researchers. We were also able to get a large grant from the Mangassarian for us to complete the scanning. And now that we're in motion, hopefully by the end of the year or in middle of next year, the scanning will be completed. And then we will look for the next phase, which will be the website. Thank you all for everything. I have to say that of all the projects that I've worked in the museum, this has been the most rewarding for me and the most emotional. At least I can say I've done one thing that I'm very happy to say before I leave this world, that I was accomplished to pay back to my own people. After all, I am the daughter of a survivor. My father was 9 years old when he left Palu. So for me, it always stayed with me, and my grandparents. So thank you everyone that is involved in this project, because without your help, I couldn't have come by myself. I also want to thank my family for their continuous support. Without their assistance, I couldn't have made it. So now, Nano, if you could show some of the pictures from my trip to Professor's home. This is Edward Marguerite as we were rearranging the files and the luggages in 2012. Next, please. The library. I'm going to show a couple of pictures of Professor's library. I have to say, from the day one I walked into that house, I was captivated. I knew that history was made and there was no return back. This project had to be moving on. Next, please. Another part of his project. And behind this white door, there was another closet. We find out more archives, boxes of archives. Next, please. This is the entrance of his house with a lot of paintings. Next, please. This is Professor in front of his house. And the second floor, that's the next two windows are where his library is. Next, please. This is with Don McKean. This was my first trip in 2011, October, having a meeting with Professor for 4 days regarding for his project. Next, please. Professor at his desk. Next, please. This is another part of the house. I have to say that this is, when I walked in the first 2-3 years, the library was full of books on the floor, but gradually things got rearranged. And this is how his house was. This is where he spent most of his days, the end of his life. The library was his life. Next, please. This is us. This is his favorite place, and I know Professor Akçam has been there numerous times. It's a beautiful botanical garden with large waterfall. He liked to go there to have a lunch there, and every time we went, that's where we spent our day. Next, please. This is my husband. At one time, we received a call because the house was full of Oriental rugs, and there were some issues of moth. So we had to rush in with my husband and with the landlord and the trustee and the caregiver. We had to put everything in buckets. But before I got there, they had already started working. And so we assisted them. Next, please. This is again, as we were cleaning up the issues with the library. Next, please. Here I am. I was taking an inventory for USC. They wanted to know how many books he had. And this is what I was doing. Next, please. And this is the closet that we found by accident. Next, please.
That's everything, Maggie.
Oh, there's one more picture with Dr. Professor in 2018. The last picture.
I think that's all we have.
Oh, I'm sorry. I wanted to show him the last picture that was in 2008. And that's okay. Thank you very much. Back to you, Nano.
Thank you so much, Maggie, for sharing your invaluable insight into the different stages of the project, as well as your relationship with Professor Dadrian. That was really great to hear about. I will now turn the event to Bardig Kouyoumjian, who will share his experiences and challenges regarding the project as well. Bardig, please.
Thank you. Good morning or good evening. I'm in Paris. So, as mentioned, Nanor, I'm a photographer and an independent researcher and much more. As a photographer, I have been photographing the Armenian diaspora for over 40 years from the angle of the struggle for the recognition and the preservation of the memory of the Armenian genocide. I published a book in 2005 in France on the last Armenians of Derzo. The pictures in this book are a small part of my entire archives. For 2025, I'm preparing an exhibition to celebrate 40 years of achievements to show for the first time some of the best photographs I took during all these years. So back in September 2015, I was invited to the conference organized by Maggie at the Ararat Eskijan Museum, Armenian Photographers, the Eye of Our Culture, when I discovered Professor Dadrian Archive Project. After 3 decades at that point of documenting the Armenian genocide through my photography, accepting this task felt like a natural progression in my journey of preserving memory. With my extensive experience in photography and as a photography lab technician and a certified Adobe expert, I was well suited for this task. So I accepted this proposal and began on February 2016. During the scanning process, I was very absorbed by the work of Dadrian archives and didn't have the opportunity to delve deeper into the content of the documents. However, I was fascinated by the depth work done by Professor Dadrian just reading the file titles. Back in France, 3 years later, after 3 stays, each time 3 months, in 2018, I took the time to examine the 188 files that I have scanned. Although I keep a backup copy at home for safekeeping, I would like just to say that, to make it clear that I don't have any intention of publishing or revealing any of this part of documents. They are just confidential, just for backup purposes. So digitizing the historical documents from Professor Dadrian's research was an inspiring experience that had profound impact on me. As I carefully flipped through each page, I could not help but feel a deep sense of respect for the immense dedication and scholarship that went into their creation. Professor Dadrian's lifelong commitment to scientifically uncovering evidences of the genocide, Armenian genocide, was palpable in every document. His meticulous attention to detail, coupled with his vast knowledge of languages, Armenian, Turkish, Ottoman Turkish, English, German, French, Russian, even Swedish and Dutch, and wide ranges of sources, Ottoman archives, German archives, Armenian archives, etc., was evident in the richness and depth of the documents I had the privilege to scan. Most files were in at least 2 to 6 languages, and some files there were even 7 or 9 languages. As I delved deeper into the documents, I was struck by the breadth and the depth of Professor Dadrian's knowledge. His ability to easily navigate multiple languages and sources was nothing short of remark, as it was clear that his work had provided invaluable information about the Armenian genocide to scholars and researchers. However, beyond the academic significance of the documents, there was also a palpable sense of urgency and importance in the work I was undertaking. By digitizing Professor Dadrian's research, I was helping to ensure that his legacy would live on for future generations, providing them with the keys to better understanding the tragic chapter of this human history. Scanning Professor Dadrian's historical documents was not just a technical task. It was a deeply moving experience that highlighted the importance of preserving the evidence of the Armenian genocide. It was an honor to me to play a small part in this valuable project for the preservation of Professor Dadrian's archive and scientific works on the Armenian genocide. So now let's talk about the challenges. The first difficulty for me was the stay for more than 3 months in the United States. It was not possible for me. So between 2016 and 2018, I came 3 times, 3 months each time. And I had to face long questions from the US Customs. The last time I came, they kept me 3 hours and they didn't want me to go out. So for the scanning process, I chose an overhead scanner to avoid damaging the documents. but Professor Dadrian's unique filing system made the process quite complex. His files often contained various dividers, files in the files, staples, glues, and paper clips, even staples and files and clips between the same inserts, requiring careful attention to all details and a lot of concentration to put everything back in the same order. Just to let you know that each scanned page takes at least 20 seconds. So if you have 15 pages of a clipped or stamped insert, that's 5 minutes. So you have to be very concentrated during these 5 minutes to get everything back in the same order. In the professor's documents, there was also small pieces of papers inserted, or in the middle of a page, a cut rectangle. So you can see what's behind this page. So you have to be very careful to when you are scanning these documents to not scan all the page. You have to put white paper under the cut pages or half pages to not mislead the reader after. Even for me, it was very challenging and confusing. One of the other features of the professor, he uses every centimeter of page on the pages. There were notes on every edges of the pages within, written by hand with a red pen. Also, there's another problem that I faced. There was larger papers that pages were larger than the containers, so they were folded or torn at the edges. So I had to flatten them or put tape on the back to make them fit. It was a very long process. For the oversized files, I had to scan them several times in several pieces to assemble them afterwards. Also, I faced another problem, that was the poor quality of the Xerox documents from the 70s and the 80s, requiring software intervention to improve readability. After scanning, I spent hours straightening text, cropping pages, or removing leftover tape to prepare the final documents of the PDF files. Working 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, sometimes even more, I digitized 188 files comprising 30,532 pages, ranging from 6 pages, that was the Constantinople file, to 1,684 pages for the Talat Pasha's file. On average, I can say that there were 89 files from 6 to 100 pages, 86 files from 101 to 500 pages, 12 files from 501 to 600 pages, and 1 file of 1,684 pages. I don't know if I have to say that, but during my first visit in 2016, I had another challenge. I juggled between digitizing Dadrian documents and assisting my friend Bardig in his documentary film, Women of 1915, as a motion graphics designer. I spent days and days, sometimes 20 hours a day in front of my computer for both projects. Balancing the two responsibilities was exhausting, but very rewarding. I don't regret. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bardig. And if you would like me to share the photos as well?
Yeah, of course. Some of the photos that Maggie sent us to share, that was the documents. So these are the files, inserts, documents, clipped, staples. So next. So this is the files of Dadrian's archives. Yeah, next. So he always assembled the documents, and sometimes you have ties all over the file, the big files. So the next, yeah, staples, clips, and even on the edge, you can see his notes and remarks. Next. This is a file. Somehow, I'm sure that there was pages that are bigger than the file, so he put some ties to keep them in the same file. Next. Yeah, you can see here great example of the filing system of the professor. So you can see clips, staples, and documents inserted in the document. So it was very, very challenging to keep them, everything in the order after scanning. Next, if there's, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Bardig, for sharing your insights into the technical aspects of the project. We really appreciate it. I will now turn the event over to Dr. Anna Aleksanyan, who will discuss the contents of the archive a little bit more deeply, as well as the indexing process.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So before starting to talk about the details of the Vahakn Dadrian archives, I want to thank Professor Akçam and also Maggie for allowing me or inviting me to become a part of this very important project. And I'm very honored that they trusted me with this work. So I assume many scholars came here today or will watch this video to find out what they can be found in the archives. And of course, many genocide scholars would come to look for genocidal research, and they will be right. The content of the Vahakn Dadrian archive in general is focused on the Armenian genocide, but as he believed that Armenian genocide was not an event, it was a process, and he believed that before 1915 events were part of that process. He worked intensively to gather all the materials to make his points, the scientific points, these research points. And so he starts from Tanzimat period. He gathers the materials. He starts with 1880s Armenian provinces situation, and then he moves to the Hamidian massacres. So we have larger files on Hamidian massacres. Then he focuses on young Turks and Armenian relations, and then the policy, premeditation of the Armenian genocide, and then, of course, 1915 events in the details. And he goes from province to province, tracking the genocide of each province. Then he goes to the concentration camps. He focuses on concentration camps. Then he, of course, goes to the trials, which is he studied a lot. You can find a lot of materials on Turkish trials after the war. But he didn't stop there. Then he continues to the Republic era. He focused on Karabakh conflict, Armenian-Turkish war, Armenian Sovietization of Armenia, the Armenian genocide denial, and so on and so forth. So if someone wants to study from Tanzimat to Turkish Republic to the denial of the Armenian genocide, that person should come and look into Dadrian archive. But he never stops there, as I have mentioned already. Dadrian was one of the leading scholars to establish the field of genocide, comparative genocide studies. So this is one aspect which helped him to, he gathered many materials and did a lot of analysis in genocide theory in general. And he, in this journey of research, he gathered a lot of materials also regarding the Holocaust and other genocides. It is also important to mention that Dadrian studied different aspects of Armenian history and Ottoman history and the history of Ottoman minorities such as Greeks, Assyrians, Jews, Arabs, and those who are interested on studying the genocide of Greeks during the First World War, or the genocide of Assyrians, or the situation of even Palestinians can be found in his files. He was a person who was interested in perpetrators, and I cannot imagine someone who studies perpetrators of Armenian genocide without studying the archives, these archives of Dadrian, because as it was mentioned by my co-speakers, many documents he gathered, put together in files that are the files of instigators of genocide, such as Talyat, Enver, Cemal, and then the face-to-face perpetrators of genocide, names that are unknown for many scholars, even the Armenian genocide scholars. You will be astonished to find these names of perpetrators, and Dadrian was tracking them throughout their life, before the genocide, during the genocide. He gives the crimes that they were committing. He gives the evidence. He gives then the evidence coming from the court, coming from the witnesses. He analyzes all this information, and then he never stops there. He continues to follow the path of these perpetrators throughout their life. As it's known, many Armenian genocide perpetrators then became part of the Kemal regime. They became they were working for the Kemalist regime. So he would follow, and he would also record their actions after the genocide and the fate of those perpetrators. The content is obviously it not stops there. You can find a lot of statistics there, maps, something that Dadrian did always gave in his hand with his notes, and mostly, as Bardig mentioned, like with red pen or blue pen, he would give details of his thoughts in those documents, or in those copies of documents that he was working on. And as a scholar, he would always give, if you look at the documents, he would always give you a hint where you look more for that very information that, for example, you come across to the Patriarchate folder when gives a name of an Armenian who survived, who survived the genocide. He would give more, saying go and read Zhamanak, or I don't know, the name of the newspaper, or if sometimes he has the part of the newspaper that has the precise information about that very person that might be useful for your research. So this is an archive that when you open the folder, you can be lost and will find yourself like reading many rich materials. He was also interested in various topics such as Zionism and Freemasonry and Armenians in the US, the Armenian orphan life. So those scholars who are interested in these topics can also look into his archives to find more. Materials that Dadrian archive has, there are two types of materials. There are handwritten materials, which are primary sources, most of them, or his own research. As you know, he intensively published his work, but I should mention that after going through his archive, I realized that he published only perhaps 20% of the work that he did, actually. And when you go through that archival documents, you understand that you have a mentor there when you read his notes. So it's very interesting experience reading his archival materials and reading his notes within these archival materials. So this archive is rich with primary sources. There are a lot of copies of official documents in different languages, and also he accompanied these materials with secondary sources, those who were published already. And you would find, as I already mentioned, but I want to repeat it, a lot of newspapers and a lot of materials taken from newspapers, which was very important. And he actually had a very rich collection of newspapers, Armenian and Turkish and Ottoman Turkish newspapers. And some of them you can find the clippings of various newspapers such as Aygadan Zamanak or Hayt Zayn you can find within the files, but the larger collection is the Ararat Eskidjan Museum. And for those scholars who are interested to find in one place every piece of information that was published during the genocide and after the genocide years, come and look in those newspapers. And interestingly enough, Dadrian made a list of those materials and made a list of those newspapers as well. So languages, Bardig already mentioned, but I want to repeat again, he knew several languages and he could use all those languages, and you can find in the archive materials on those languages such as Ottoman Turkish, Modern Turkish, Armenian, even Russian, French, English, German, and mostly the documents that I came across were on those languages. To just give you an idea what I'm talking about, so this is one of the largest files from the Dadrian archive. It's it's Talyat's file. As you see, he gave his own names to the files. He did his own categorization, which we didn't change, and so we give his own title that he gave for the original folder. And if you can see, there, for example, this one is about the Talyat's decision for genocide of the Armenians, Ottoman Turkish archival document. So you would find that archival document, and in most cases you would also find the transcripts of those documents, which is very important. He then worked on those transcripts, and then he did the translations, and afterwards he would work on those documents. So just to show the cycle of his work, this is just an example, and you can see how he worked. So for the indexing, when the archive will be available, it will be for scholars who are interested to reach it online. So we created this system. You will see the titles of the boxes. Each box had many folders, and each folder had many different files. So again, following Vahakn Dadrian's categorization and following his own wording, we created this index, giving title of the folder, giving a brief description what you can find in each folder, and also the content. And also we created list of keywords, which is very important, because with these keywords, which are names of places, names of individuals, names of events, you can easily find all available materials regarding to that event or to that person or to that place. For example, if you are looking for Talat Pasha files, and Dadrian had Talat Pasha files not only in Talat folder or Talat box, let's say, but he had Talat Pasha's folder in different files. So when you will search Talat Pasha, you will be able to find each and every document related to Talat Pasha, even if it has just one sentence in it. Or if you are interested in Ankara, for example, Dadrian has a folder named Ankara, then you find that folder and you find each and every document or a testimony that he has in his archives, which talks about Ankara, the Armenian genocide there, or survivors' testimonies, anything that was available to Dadrian. And importantly, it is I was when I was preparing for today, I was thinking what he doesn't have in his archive. I was asking myself regarding to Armenian genocide, and I couldn't find anything that he doesn't have in this archive. So he has everything in his archive. So it is kind of a heaven for those genocide scholars who wants to start working on that period of Ottoman Armenian history, and that period of and to do their genocide research in general. So as I have mentioned, Dadrian was obsessed, and I would use this word obsessed because this is the truth. He was obsessed with key perpetrators, instigators of genocide, those who were behind the scenes, like those who gave the ideology, those who became face-to-face killers, face-to-face perpetrators. So he would actually follow them, as I've mentioned, from the very beginning of their career as civil servants or just citizens, Ottoman citizens, or just neighbors of Armenians, and then how they progressed, how they become part of that genocidal machine, and how they became perpetrators, what they gained becoming perpetrators, and what was the result of their actions, actually. So this is just one file from another bigger folder, and Mustafa Abdulhalik Renda, I remember his lectures about perpetrators, and he talked about Renda a lot, so that's why I chose this file. So you can see that within this file, he had how many different, within this folder, he had how many different files. the English translation of the official Ottoman coded documents that Mustafa Abdul Halik and Talyat Pasha, I mean, they sent from them. Then the other folder, the term of the ruling of Mustafa Abdul Halik Rada, written by Krieger, Gergerian. And I have to mention that many scholars and those specialists in the field worked with Dadrian. They seeked his advice. Dadrian was very close to Father Gergerian, and you will find their back and forth, their comments on each other's works, which is very fascinating, particularly for me, because I know Gergerian archive, and I came across with Dadrian's letters and his comments on Gergerian's works, and here I saw several works of Father Krieger. So you can find in this file primary and secondary sources on Bitlis genocide, and also survivors' testimonies, witnesses' testimonies, and then the Anglo-Turkish Mixed Arbitral Tribunal by Mustafa Abdul Halik Bey. Again, short biography of Mustafa Abdul Halik Bey, including his crimes. He would give details of what crimes he committed, this individual committed, and who came forward from survivors giving their testimonies back in 1918, 1920s, and then afterwards. And the last one, the prison of Ayash, the Armenian political leader arrested on 24th of April. So again, Dadrian was obsessed with perpetrators, but he also was very much interested in victims. And you will find files and files and files about the victims, the political prisoners who were killed. For example, Zugirikor Zohrab and Vartkes, their case. You will find files on the trials. He analyzed it very well, and not only, I mean, you might be familiar with his book that he published with Professor Taner Akçam on the trials, but there are a lot of materials on this topic and many, many pages that he copied from the Armenian Archives of Jerusalem, Armenian Archive, which are the Patriarchate Archives, the Information Bureau that was gathering the information from Armenian survivors, and also importantly, because Dadrian became so known scholar and he gave public lectures for Armenian community members, many would come forward after his talk, and they would send like actual memoirs or handwritten memoirs or records of their grandfathers or their fathers, mothers survived genocide. And this also makes Dadrian archive very unique, because you can find many unpublished sources in his archive. So I don't want to go any further. If you will have questions, I will happily answer in Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna, for giving us a closer look into the nature of the archival materials, as well as, thank you to the rest of our fascinating speakers for your remarks, all of which really provided a holistic view of all of your experiences with Professor Dadrian and this important project. We will now hold our Q&A session. As a reminder, for those joining us on Zoom, you have the opportunity to send questions to us by clicking on the Q&A button on the bottom portion of your screen and typing in your question. So before we begin, Dr. Akçam, would you like to start us off with any remarks or questions?
I will add a couple of issues Anna already mentioned. Thank you, Anna, and thank you, Maggie and Bardig. It was really amazing, your presentations. It showed us the scope of the materials. We have to make a distinction between the online archive and the original materials, okay? Some of the materials, for example, extensive newspaper collections. Let's give me an example, Agos newspaper from Istanbul. So he compiled all these Marmara newspaper from Istanbul. Some of them are available online, and we may indicate which newspaper collection we are not going to scan because of the size, because of the financial aspect, but we will say, I mean, on the index, you will get the remark that they are available hard copies. Whoever wants to see, either, of course, they can search in internet, but they can come to Armenian Museum. So Maggie prepared, it's an excellent room there. And those who wants to see the original materials then can come to Ararat Museum and look for there. And this combination of various materials is really incredible. As Anna mentioned, the unpublished memoirs of individual Armenian survivors and the all materials from several archives, German archive, British archive, Austrian archive, American archives, they are all in that and cataloged in a based on certain topics that he worked. And maybe, I mean, I'm not explained all this, but we have enough experience from Krikor-Gergerian archive, indexing the Krikor-Gergerian archive. We really use the same method, and thanks Anna, she's developing an incredible indexing. I mean, we can promise that the content-wise, there won't be anything that you are going to miss. We try to give a word, place name, person name, or event, anything. We developed an extensive index so that you can find really information where you can find the related materials. So it will be a huge contribution. Maybe my last remark, it is not an archive on Armenian genocide, because he worked on comparative genocide studies, not only on Greeks or other Ottoman minorities or groups you can find materials, but he worked extensively on Holocaust to compare Armenian genocide with Holocaust. He worked on Rwanda. He tried to really understand the genocide in comparative perspective. He was one of the founder of the comparative genocide research. You will really be surprised or amazed to see the scope of this wealth of materials. And we hope we will develop the same thing in the future for Richard Hovhannisyan materials. These were really two giants of our field. Thank you. This is my addition.
Thank you, Dr. Akçam. I would like to kick us off with a question for any of our speakers that are welcome to respond to. I'm curious if, similar to Dadrian's focus on genocide perpetrators throughout his career that Anna mentioned, is there any topic or file that any of you came across within the archival materials that, such as maybe specific testimonies or newspaper articles, whose content you are interested in pursuing or researching further, whether it be specific or general? Was there something that stuck out to you that you discovered?
Can answer that. And there is another question for Ani Hovhannisyan, so we should go over to that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Of course. So my thesis focused on women. So how women survived, and I came across with many face-to-face perpetrators mentioned by these women. And when I started working on the Dadrian archive, actually, I wasn't tracking perpetrators, but when I started working on the Dadrian archive, I found those individuals, and I was shocked. I was like, oh, these are the individuals who committed these crimes that I have mentioned from victims' perspective. So this was fascinating. And also, many unknown names. For example, I was doing research on Ismail Bey from Trabzon, and I couldn't find out any information about this Ismail Bey, who was face-to-face killer, who did actually kill most of the Trabzon Armenian men. In Vahakn Dadrian archive, I found the file on him, and I was astonished how he tracked this person, and it was very helpful. I'm sure that those scholars who are looking on this kind of materials, they will be surprised how rich it is, the archive, the Dadrian archive.
I may add one more, I mean, to the surprise part of the issue. Sometimes you will be surprised finding a German newspaper from 1914. Nobody would know the existence of such a source. And this really shows the dimension of the entire archive. And at the end, we will put there will be link on Ararat Eskijian Museum. I mean, I have to underline, we are thankful to Maggie to carry out this vision, this mission. This is all Maggie that brought this up to this point. And she can now, even though she said maybe she can repeat when this scanning process will end, scanning process and indexing going parallel to each other. The more files coming in, we go over to indexing, and from a technical point of view, we might need some other really help for the indexing process. Anna is working now on it, but we have the same experience from Gergerian archive. One individual is not enough to complete the entire indexing process, and this will be really an important challenge for us when the scanning process is over. To my knowledge, Maggie, correct me, the already scanned material are only maybe 20–30% of the entire archive.
That is correct.
So this means, I mean, the enormity is amazing. I mean, we over the years, Bardig could only look into the maybe 20% of these materials, and the 80% is still it's in the process. And we need, this is my estimate, long term, we need new indexers, new young scholars, graduate students to complete this process. And in Ararat Eskijian Museum's website and in our website, Promise Armenian Institute website, there will be a special link, there will be a special website for this project. We are in the process of creating this, and just clicking and going there. And as I mentioned, the hard covers of the archive is in Ararat Eskijian Museum. Who wants to go and look into these original materials, they should get a special permission from Maggie, and she will arrange, or whoever will follow Maggie's position, it will be the Ararat Eskijian Museum.
Maggie, was there anything you wanted to add, or?
I was going to say that the person that wants to scan has to be somebody like Bardig, who has the patience and the passion for it. Because it's not easy to sit down 8 hours every day. As he said, the time to prepare the scan. Now that we facilitated, at the time when Bardig was doing it, everything was raw. We had not changed anything. We hadn't removed the staples. And in addition, we had to keep everything the way the professor wanted, back everything. It was unknown to us. It wasn't given to us. It was not until much later on. I keep saying 2016, but that Bardig is right. It was 2018 when we find out that he created a trust, and that's when he told me, you can keep it. Then I was able to start working on it, because otherwise Bardig had the difficulty because everything was raw. I mean, you had to have, those staples were not easy to remove. They were old style staples, and it's glued to the spine of he glued everything because he was scared it would come apart. You have to take a special sharp knife to separate the pages. And then he writes all over. I didn't show samples because our time is limited. There's not even 1 inch left on the side. So if you break the page or break the spine, you lose the content of what he tried to reference, because he puts the dots together in this book, which is not related to the genocide, but there's material that he connects it together. And Anna and Professor can attest to that. So that was the difficulty. And we're not complaining. This is, I don't think he ever envisioned that one day this is going to be scanned. He was doing it for himself, for his own classification, indexing. But we saw that. I have a passion for history. I've known it for a long time. And I want to say that early 2000, as we were expanding our library, I had put advertisements in the newspapers. Dadrian was the first one to respond, and he sent me 150 books from his library. I still have his notes. He's documented every single title of the book that he donated to us, and frequently he did it. He said, I don't have space anymore, and I'm getting all those books. He was forwarding to us. So there was a relationship established. And I never realized one day that I'm going to be involved in this project. It was never in my project, but it came in. And once I went to his house, I was captivated. I just couldn't. There was no going back. I had to go forward. It wasn't easy. It was a lot of frustration. Funding wasn't a big issue. We were not nonprofit at the time. We were not nonprofit yet, and we were. But I have to thank the R at Home. The board was very supportive of the mission, and everyone that helped me out, every individual, even though if I don't mention your name, they're all there for me, because it took a village to put together. And hopefully now that I feel comfortable under the leadership of the professor and or the individuals, we are in the right track. And yesterday I got an email from UCLA. The first part is almost done. They're ready to go for the next phase. So we're moving along well. And I'm so glad that it's close by. My biggest worry was most of those companies scanning are up north or out of state. I didn't want those archives to go back again and get lost. That was my biggest worry. And I'm very happy that we're in the right track, and hopefully by within a year, hopefully we'll do. And as Professor said, we need to secure more funding so that we can do more indexing. And that's where the core of the issue, the importance is, like Anna is doing. Back to you, I'm sorry.
Thank you. No, that was great. Thank you so much. One of our audience members is asking how Professor Dadrian's editorial assets can be made more accessible to researchers in Turkey and Azerbaijan.
I mean, it's very easy. Internet is open access as long as the governments, Azerbaijan and Turkey, bans the access to that resource. People can easily access, and I assume there is no restriction regarding the Krikor-Gergerian archive, I know from scholars. So it will be the same with Dadrian archive. Azerbaijan, I don't know the country much, whether they have restrictions for the internet access in their country. This might be an issue. I don't know. I cannot answer. But the important thing is it reminded me two different things. Number one, really we should encourage the graduate students or the students to write a dissertation on these individuals. We don't have any really dissertation on Aramandonian, on Krikor-Gergerian, and now Vahakn Dadrian and Richard Pavanessian. They all deserved a specific dissertation, and their archive is really immensible, and it's very important for these kind of, and we should also encourage, this is other job that I have, or other scholars, encourage students, graduate students, to go and use these materials for their research papers. I know I have two students in their dissertation process, and their main contribution will be to incorporate the materials in Krikor-Gergerian archive in the genocide research. You know, we have to make a distinction. Alone, Dadrian's material is out there and accessible. That might not mean a lot. As long as the individuals, the scholars, incorporate these into genocide, into research project, This is the whole purpose of actually scanning these materials and making them available. So we should encourage young students to go to this archive, using the materials in that archive and developing some papers. It's very useful. You know, if you want to write something on Mustafa Abdülhalik Renda or any other perpetrator, you don't really need to start from scratch. You can go in Vahakn Dadrian archive and you have at least 50, 60, 70, 80, maybe 100 sources that Dadrian compiled. This is a wonderful start for everyone.
Great, thank you so much. We don't have any other Q&As from the audience. However, I wanted to give the floor to our speakers in case you had any other additional remarks that you wanted to make before the conclusion of our webinar today.
I just want to say thank you all. Thank you, Professor, for your leadership again. And I am very happy that we're in the right direction. So thank you. Thank you, Anna, and thank you, Bardig. And thank you, Nanor and Hasmi, for organizing this webinar.
I mean, I have to repeat only one thing. Thank you, Maggie, to really to be the engine of this process and to allow us to participate in this project. This is really very crucial and important for the founder of Armenian Genocide Research.
Thank you.
Thank you
Great.
all.
Thank you.
Please,
Sorry.
Bardig, please.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Maggie, giving me the opportunity and the honor of taking part of this great project, and hoping that in the near future, all the files will be scanned and indexed, and researchers can access to all these documents to continue the struggle and continue the work that Dadrian began. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We have reached the end of our webinar today. Thank you to our delightful speakers, and thank you to our audience for your engagement with today's event. This was a truly fascinating presentation. The Armenian Genocide Research Program and the Promise Armenian Institute have a number of events coming up, so we encourage you to consult our website and social media to learn more about them. And thank you again to the Ararat Eskişehir Museum for its co-sponsorship of this event, as well as its invaluable collaboration on the project itself. In closing, we'd also like to offer our grateful thanks to Hasmi Baldassarian, Deputy Director of the Promise Armenian Institute, for her efforts in coordinating today's webinar. And thank you once again to all of you for your attendance, and we look forward to having you participate in future events for the Armenian Genocide Research Program within the Promise Armenian Institute at UCLA. Thank you all.
Thank you.